Hey everyone, Rarity here. Time for another Patreon-sponsored blind reaction. And this one comes to you courtesy of Will, who has requested that I react to the Castlevania Timeline Remakes and Side Stories Button Smash by GamerthumbTV. So, yeah, I completed the main part of the Castlevania Timeline from this channel, but we got one more video to do, apparently. We've got Remakes and Side Stories, which, fair enough. I mean, there definitely is stuff in the series that kind of falls outside that main timeline. I can't really think of much at the moment, though. I mean, I guess there's stuff like that, that Wii game, the fighting game, which wasn't very good, but had some cool art, so that was at least something. I don't know. I mean, we talked about Circle of the Moon already, didn't we? And I believe that was kind of ruled out of canon, ultimately, though. I mean, it's such a good game that people tend to put it in there anyway. So, I don't know. At least I think we talked about that. I don't honestly remember. It's been a while since I watched the other videos. But, if not, we'll bring that up here. Not really sure what else, but I'm interested to find out. This video isn't as long as the other parts, only about 16 minutes, so not quite as much to talk about with the remakes and side stories, but it should be interesting. And I'm sure there are games that I don't even know about that we'll be discussing here today. So let's go ahead and get this started and see what we got. Here we go. Alright, GamerthumbTV. Button smash.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again here on GamerthumbTV.
Judgment art.
We're reaching close to the end of this month and the end of the Castlevania takeover on this channel. Now that we've gone through the entire classic Castlevania timeline and have a full understanding of how all the games are tied together story-wise, let's touch on some of the more notable games I didn't really go over in the timeline series. Those remakes and side stories that might confuse newcomers to the franchise that are trying to follow the story. Let's start with Castlevania Legends. I talked about it
I think I've heard of
during
this
my
one
Unlimited
before,
Replay
so
episode,
I don't know much about it.
I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but we'll go over some of the key points that kept it off the timeline. Castlevania Legends is the first Castlevania game and only one that stars a female.
Damn, she's hot.
It's not a bad game.
Why make this
like
non-canon?
Castlevania Game Boy games. But one thing I hated was all the different paths that you can accidentally take that end up in what's basically dead ends. You know, sometimes there's a pork chop or whatever at the end.
She deserves to be canon.
But then you got to walk all the way back, risking getting hit and losing all the health you just picked up. But anyways, going back to the storyline, I usually just ignore when long-running game or movie franchise start throwing out pieces of the story and call them non-canon. In my head, I usually just try to find a way to make that story fit in the timeline, even if it's no longer official, as long as it doesn't really conflict drastically with any other story in that universe. But Legends was taken out for a couple of good reasons. First of all, the story takes place in 1450, which already messes up the time frame when Dracula actually started attacking humanity. That's been established as happening in the 1470s, so this is way too early. Around the 1450s, Dracula wasn't really bothering anyone, he was just kind of keeping to himself. And even the Netflix series confirms this now.
Kill everything you see. Kill them all. Oh, now. Kill. Kill. For my love. Kill.
Yeah, I need to get back to that. Definitely on the list.
In the game, Dracula
Season
also
3
mentions that Sonya is the first human to ever face him. It's also been established that the first human to face Dracula in combat was Trevor, not Sonya. The other big issue was the ending. During the story, it's pretty clear that Alucard and Sonya have some kind of romance going on, and in the true ending, Sonya is holding baby Trevor, heavily implying that Alucard is his father, although they don't outright say it.
That would make things different.
That would make Sonya Trevor's mom, Alucard his father. So when Alucard and Trevor meet in Castlevania 3 and start fighting each other before teaming up, that's father and son. And every Belmont after Trevor
kind of changes the dynamic.
blood to Dracula. Castlevania Legends was made by a different development team from the ones that were usually working on Castlevania.
That explains a lot. I mean, it looks good.
The whole storyline just didn't sit well with the original team, so it was just completely ignored. Legends was also supposed to be the origin story of the Belmont clan versus Dracula, but then we got Lament of Innocence on the PS2, which took that spot and fleshed out all the details. So check out Castlevania Legends, but ignore the story details. It definitely didn't happen. Now let's talk about some of the remakes. Super Castlevania 4 on the SNES is one of the best games on the console and one of the best Castlevania games, and you can ignore the 4 in the title. I don't know why they slap numbers on these kind of games, because it's not a part 4 of anything really. It's actually a full-blown Super Nintendo makeover of the original Castlevania on the NES, retelling Simon's first encounter with Dracula.
Cool.
It did include some major improvements, the graphics being an obvious major upgrade.
Yeah.
You can also whip in multiple directions and spin it around. But Castlevania wasn't just revamped once. Castlevania Chronicles hit home consoles on the original PlayStation and was yet another makeover of Castlevania. This time around, you have an original mode that keeps the spirit of the original game intact with Simon's more barbaric look and updated graphics. Or you can choose Arrange mode, which is the one I prefer. It remixes the music into an awesome high-energy beat. And Simon's look gets completely revamped with a new red-haired look, which Konami adopted over time as Simon's official look.
Still looks kind of slow, though. I don't know. Maybe.
Although all three of these games tell the same story, Konami did a great job making them each feel like totally different experiences. Then we have Castlevania Rondo of Blood, which I showed in the Timeline series. Rondo of Blood was released exclusively in Japan for the PC Engine, known in the US as the TurboGrafx 16. Right now it's available on the Wii Virtual Console, and it's also unlockable in the PSP Castlevania Dracula.
Yeah, that's how I played it.
Going back to the 90s when it first came out, if you wanted to play it, you would have to settle for the Super Nintendo version. And that's what Dracula X is, which, by the way, in Europe it was called Vampire's Kiss. This game is basically Rondo of Blood, but a little bit of a watered down version in comparison. Now, I do want to explain something because for some reason, I get a lot of flack when I call Dracula X a remake or port of Rondo of Blood. There's this argument that it's a totally separate game, and I get that. It does feel very different and has a lot of original aspects that aren't in Rondo of Blood. It does stand as its own game. But what I mean by remake or port is that it's a version of Rondo of Blood's story. It's not a completely separate encounter that Richter had with Dracula. Gameplay-wise, yes, you are playing a different game. And why did I include Rondo of Blood in the Timeline series in comparison to Dracula X? I may have taken some liberties with the story, where there's been some gaps or things that don't make sense, but I wanted to stick as close to Castlevania canon where I could. And the final battle of the game basically confirms that Rondo of Blood is the way the story went down. Everyone agrees that Symphony of the Night is 1000% canon in the Castlevania universe. There's no doubt about it. Here's the final battle between Richter and Dracula as depicted in the flashback at the beginning of Symphony of the Night. And here's the final battle as depicted in Rondo of Blood.
Looks pretty similar.
Showing you the same battle, right? Well, here's the final battle in Dracula X. So clearly Dracula X isn't the official version of Richter's story. Dracula X also has a different art style altogether. It redesigned the levels, and some of the gameplay is a bit different. For example, you can still save Maria, but you can't play as her like you could in the original game.
That sucks.
Dracula also took a couple of girls hostage in the original, but in Dracula X, some of them are completely missing from the game, compared to Rondo of Blood. And over on the PSP, we also have Castlevania The Dracula X Chronicles, which is the PSP remake of Rondo of Blood. This one is a proper remake with an awesome 2.5D graphical overhaul. It's fully voice acted,
and that's actually probably what I played.
More detailed script, and it lets you play as Maria, just like the original one did. Dracula X Chronicles.
I probably tried the original version too. That was on there.
The Rondo of Blood experience. Although the original PC Engine version is still my favorite. The gameplay itself is extremely similar, and it feels very polished, and the final battle with Dracula ignored the Dracula X version, taking inspiration from the Rondo of Blood boss fight. And if you're going through collecting all the games or trying to play through all of them, you may also run into one called the Castlevania Adventure ReBirth. It's exclusively a downloadable Wii game, and it's a reimagining of the Castlevania Adventure for Game Boy, starring Christopher Belmont. It's a complete overhaul of the game, and it's an absolute must.
Yeah, I mean, just look at it.
Fan. The music is all redone beautifully. The
Those look pretty cool. I never played that one.
The bosses and the levels are changed, and graphically, it looks like a really high-quality Super Nintendo game. I think this one really flew under the radar. I never hear anyone talking about
never heard of that.
Even among Castlevania fans. Probably because it was exclusively on the Wii and specifically a downloadable title, so I'm not too surprised there. And instead of Dracula turning into a giant bat,
if I knew about that, I would have played it.
He turns into this huge horned face too. So the final battle is quite different.
Kind of disappointed that I didn't hear about that during the Wii days. That looks cool.
Putting nostalgia aside, it is a much better game than the original, and Castlevania Judgment was another Wii-exclusive Castlevania title, and a side story that mashes several characters from the Castlevania universe together. It's also the first and only Castlevania fighting game, but it's not a traditional fighting game like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. I'm not even sure what to compare it to be honest. The fighting mechanics are pretty simple, and characters run around in a fully 3D arena, and they each have a special ultimate attack they can do. And I actually really enjoyed this game, fighting as all the different characters in the Castlevania
it was kind of fun. It's not really a great game.
Moves. The reason I didn't include it in the Timeline series, aside from the fact that Konami says it's not canon, is because of the story. Curse of Darkness had this character I didn't really cover called Saint Germain, who almost seems like a representation of time itself. So he travels around witnessing different events. In Judgment, there's a similar character called Aeon that's plucking all these characters from the Castlevania timeline at different points in their life. Interesting story, but if I had included this in the timeline, I would have had to stop the flow of the story every 2 seconds to explain a character going into a time rift and going through the events of Judgment. It would have been messy, uninteresting, and very distracting to the storytelling. And when this came out, Castlevania was going through this weird transition in its art style. When Castlevania first started, it was very Conan Barbarian-like, and eventually it kind of morphed into a more like a vampire gothic art style that looks super awesome. And at this point in time, it was going into this very generic anime style. Now, I'll admit I might be biased because I'm not a big fan of anime at all, outside of Dragon Ball and maybe 2 or 3 others, so I have no idea what these designs were inspired by. I think it was Death Note or something like that.
It's literally the artist from Death Note.
Down below. Honestly, I never really cared enough to look into it. Let's look at the characters from the other games and see how they look here. Alucard doesn't look too different, just wearing some different armor that we've seen him wear. He looks fine. Carmilla looks like some kind of half-naked vampire stripper. She kind of reminds me of Voldo from Soul Calibur with all those straps.
Kind of fits
Death
for her.
Looks completely different in every game that he's in after he transforms, so he looks different here again. Cornell looks like a badass in this game. This is one redesign for a character that I am totally down for. In the N64, he's basically just this wolf with pants on. In Judgment, he's fully armored up. Dracula looks like Dracula, but he's wearing some steampunk-inspired armor with some kind of side nipple hole things that... It reminds me of, if you're a Dragon Ball fan, it looks like Janemba's fat form. Eric Lacard from Castlevania Bloodlines on the Sega Genesis is shown. You wouldn't be able to tell by just looking at him, because in this he looks like a much younger form, holding the Alucard spear, and he absolutely looks like a girl. There's a golem, which has appeared as an enemy throughout the Castlevania series. Sometimes it's a boss, sometimes it's a regular enemy. Grant is here from Castlevania 3 in his monster form, looking like some kind of mummy with blades, reminding me even more of Voldo.
Yeah, I can
even
see
the way
it.
he moves around sometimes is quite similar. Maria is the strangest character in here, though. She's a teenager here, so I guess it's sometime between Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night. I have no clue why, but they made her obsessed with giant breasts. I think it's hilarious, but it makes no sense.
If you're here, you
Also
must
made
be
her a
one as
magical
well.
girl.
They're huge.
Wow.
Will you stop? These things only get in the way.
How can you say that? They're a sacred gift.
This is why we love
Sweetie
Maria.
pie. You'll make a nice little appetizer. Even the vampires are bigger than mine.
Anyways, Shanoa's in there with a shorter haircut and different clothes. She just looks like Bayonetta. Sypha is in here also, looking like a typical anime priestess of some kind. Trevor looks like he's a little bit older than he was in any previous game. And what I find interesting is that he's wearing an eye patch. He's usually represented as having a scar on his eye, but this is the first time we've seen him missing that eye completely. And they took Simon's look from Castlevania Chronicles and turned him into some kind of weird Japanese goth metal star with perfectly gelled hair, leather straps, tattoos. I mean, it doesn't look awful from a character design point of view. I never pictured Simon this way at all. It doesn't scream Simon Belmont to me. Like I said, I have mixed feelings on the art design in this game. Check it out. And the last game I'm going to show you today is Harmony of Despair. It's available on the PlayStation Network on PS3 and Xbox Live Arcade on the 360. I was freaking addicted to this game for the longest time. It virtually has no story, and it was a mishmash of a bunch of Castlevania games. You could pick a bunch of different characters, and they don't really level up, but you're constantly picking up better equipment, improving all your stats. And it gets extremely
Was it like an online thing?
addicting. The stages are expanded versions of stages taken from different Castlevania games. There's not really a lot to say about this one other than
that's kind of
it's easy to get hooked on this game. Combining all the different attacks with different characters to see what they do, selecting background music of your choice that plays, which, by the way, is made up of awesome remixes of classic Castlevania tunes.
A lot of familiar enemies there. And yeah, that music. Gotta love it. Ninja suit, huh?
And if you have friends that like Castlevania, you can jump online and have a 6-player game going, which gets crazy. And it's insanely hard by yourself, so you'll definitely need some friends to get through it without ripping your hair out. But I hope that this Castlevania Timeline series has gotten some of you interested in going out and playing through these games. Part of my goal with doing this series, aside from being an enormous Castlevania fan, was to introduce younger generations to this world. I just recently turned 31 years old, so I grew up playing these games from the very beginning. But there's a ton of younger gamers out there who grew up with games like Halo and Call of Duty, which isn't a bad thing. I'm also a fan of those games. But they did miss out on the early days of gaming completely. So if you're a younger viewer,
that's kind of interesting to think about.
Go out and pick them up if you've got the
I mean, I missed a lot of these too, but
download them on the Wii Virtual Console. It doesn't matter.
That's not because I didn't have the opportunity. I mean, I had the.
If you're a veteran gamer like me,
had all the consoles.
Hell out
I
of
just
these games. I hope you just had
didn't
fun
discover the
sitting
series
back and
until
listening
later.
to the story of classic Castlevania. And now I'll share with you my upcoming surprise video, which I had no plans on making, but due to popular demand, it's coming. Join me next time for the Castlevania Timeline Part 5, The Lords of Shadow.
Yeah.
We'll explore the reimagined vision of the Castlevania story, starring a brand new hero and a completely different Castlevania universe.
Skipped out on that one. Never a fan when you just abandon the old timeline completely. But there we are. That was pretty interesting. I spent a lot of time on Judgment and the character designs there, but they are really interesting. That was an interesting game, and I know I said it was not that great, but I mean I did still play it and enjoy a lot of it. I forgot the stuff of Maria. That's hilarious. But yeah, they had the Death Note character designer in there, and it definitely shows. Well, I mean, Death Note didn't really have a lot of crazy character designs other than the Shinigami, because I guess L's kind of weird looking, but and most of them are just fairly normal, but yeah, definitely had a chance to get creative with Castlevania here. And it's kind of interesting. And yeah, I mean, his comments about the art style are, I think, pretty much universally shared by the fandom for Castlevania. No one was really a fan of when we went from Aria of Sorrow to Dawn of Sorrow. That art jump. Because, I mean, it was the same person doing the art for such a long stretch, and it was just consistent, and they were so good that when we went to another artist, I mean, it wouldn't be as big a deal under normal circumstances, I don't feel, if we had a gradual shift towards a more anime art style, but yeah, just suddenly dropping off with the familiar artist and going to that was not really the best thing. I mean, personally, I wasn't quite as bothered by it because, I mean, I am a big anime fan. But for someone who isn't, I can imagine it's a bigger deal. Though it was still disappointing. But yeah, the other games covered, kind of a shame that Sonya is not canon looking at her art. Speaking of great art. But yeah, and then all that stuff about Rondo Blood and Dracula X. Yeah, my only experience with that is the PSP version, which meant I played that remake. I don't remember it looking like that though I guess it did. I'm sure I touched the version that was on the original version that was on that in that game too. So yeah, I guess I remember that more somehow, the look of it at least. But I don't know. Not really sure. Yeah, that other one he talked about, the one on the Wii, that the remake. That I wish I knew that existed back at the time. I would have played that. I mean, I had a Wii. I wasn't really downloading games at the time. I mean, that was just such a foreign concept to me still. But if I had known, I might have. I think I had heard about the whole online one at the end. I just never really took an interest in it. But actually looking at it, it looks really cool. So I don't know. But there we go. Good stuff. Interesting video. Some cool information in there. And I like his idea of trying to introduce Castlevania to newer gamers. Though I'm guessing that, I mean, the animated series is going to do that quite a bit. Going to introduce new people to the series overall. I don't know if they'll move on to the games. I mean, some of them might, but you never know. At least they're introduced to the brand. And it's kind of a shame that Konami doesn't seem to really be doing much of it anymore, other than, I guess, agreeing to give the rights to the series. Haven't heard much about a new Castlevania game coming anytime soon. And if they did do it, it probably wouldn't be what we're looking for anyway. It'd probably be either another reboot at this point, or more with the Lord of the Shadows one. But yeah, I don't know. Good stuff, though. I hope you liked the reaction. Let me know if you did, and see you in the next one.